was a stormy Friday night when I found myself alone at home. My parents had gone to a late-night event, leaving me to take care of the house. They trusted me. After all, I was 16 and responsible enough. At least, that's what I thought. The house felt eerily quiet after they left. The only sound was the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. I decided to make myself some hot chocolate, thinking it would be a perfect comfort drink for such a night. As I stood in the kitchen, waiting for the milk to warm, I felt a strange sensation, like I was being watched. I shook it off as just my imagination, stirred the chocolate, and headed to the living room. Settling on the couch, I turned on the TV and flicked through channels, trying to find something that could take my mind off the unsettling feeling gnawing at me. I landed on a movie, some old black and white horror film. Its grainy footage and eerie music only added to the atmosphere, but I decided to watch it anyway. Halfway through the movie, I heard a faint creak. I muted the TV and listened intently, heart pounding. The house was still. I convinced myself it was just the old wooden floor settling or the wind outside. I resumed the movie, but my mind couldn't fully focus. Suddenly, I heard another sound, this time louder and more distinct. It was coming from upstairs. It sounded like a soft thud, followed by the faintest creak of a door hinge. Panic began to rise in my chest. I told myself it must be the wind pushing against a window or a door, but deep down I knew that wasn't it. I stood up, trying to gather my courage, and decided to check it out. I grabbed the nearest object I could use as a weapon, a heavy metal flashlight, and slowly made my way up the stairs. Each step felt like it echoed through the silent house. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure it could be heard. Reaching the top of the stairs, I stood in the hallway, peering into the darkness. The only light was the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the corridor. I took a deep breath and started checking the rooms one by one. Everything seemed normal until I reached my parents' bedroom. The door was ajar, which was unusual. They always kept it closed. I pushed it open slowly, the hinge creaking loudly in the silence. The room was dark, but as my eyes adjusted, I could see the window was open, rain splattering the curtains. I quickly shut it and turned around, ready to leave when something caught my eye. In the corner of the room by the closet, there was a shadow. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then it moved. A tall, dark figure stepped forward, and I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and my grip tightened on the flashlight. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to sound brave. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it moved closer, slowly and deliberately. I could see it more clearly now. It was a man, dressed in dark, wet clothes, his face obscured by the shadows. Panic surged through me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I swung the flashlight at him with all my might. It passed right through him. I stumbled back, almost losing my balance. The man continued to advance, his eyes now visible, glowing with an otherworldly light. I backed into the hallway, my mind racing. This wasn't an intruder. This was something else entirely. I turned and ran down the stairs, nearly tripping in my haste. I reached the living room, grabbed my phone, and called my parents. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, my hands shaking, but still no answer. I felt a cold presence behind me and spun around to see the figure standing at the bottom of the stairs, its eyes fixed on me. I bolted for the front door, yanking it open and running out into the storm. The rain was pouring down, drenching me instantly, but I didn't care. I ran to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door. They opened it, looking shocked and concerned as I babbled incoherently about the figure in my house. They let me in and we called the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the house thoroughly but found nothing unusual. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing out of place. They chalked it up to my imagination, possibly triggered by the storm and being alone. But I knew what I saw. The figure's glowing eyes haunted my dreams for weeks. My parents, though concerned, eventually moved on, thinking it was just a one-time scare. I never stayed alone at home again after that night. Every creak, Every shadow in that house reminded me of the figure that had come so close. And sometimes, on stormy nights, I could swear I saw those glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. It was a chilly autumn evening and the sun had already set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. My parents were out for the night, attending a friend's anniversary party, leaving me alone at home. I wasn't too worried. Our neighborhood was usually quiet and safe. But as the darkness settled in, a sense of unease began to creep over me. I decided to keep myself busy with homework and then treat myself to a movie. I was halfway through a math assignment when I heard a noise outside. It was a soft, scraping sound, like something being dragged across the pavement. I shrugged it off, thinking it was probably just a raccoon rummaging through the trash cans. But then I heard it again, closer this time. I went to the window and peered out. The street was deserted, but the shadows seemed to dance and shift with the flickering streetlights. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the growing paranoia. Returning to my homework, I forced myself to concentrate, but the sound continued, persistent and unnerving. Unable to ignore it any longer, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the front door. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, the cool night air sending a shiver down my spine. The sound stopped abruptly as I stepped outside, and I scanned the yard and driveway but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just as I was about to go back inside, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Our neighbor, Mr. Hargrove, was standing in his driveway staring at me. Mr. Hargrove was known to be a bit odd. He kept to himself and rarely interacted with anyone in the neighborhood. There were rumors about him, of course. People said he was a recluse, maybe even a bit unhinged. "Good evening," I called out, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond, just stood there watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I gave him a small wave and retreated back into the house, locking the door behind me. Something about his gaze was unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I returned to my homework, but my focus was shattered. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. I decided to take a break and make some popcorn, hoping a movie would distract me. As the popcorn popped in the microwave, I heard a loud thud coming from the back of the house. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed the flashlight again and cautiously made my way to the back door. Through the window, I could see a shadow moving near the garage. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. No response. I took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping into the backyard. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but I saw nothing unusual. I walked towards the garage, the beam revealing nothing but fallen leaves and a rake propped against the wall. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a whisper. It was faint, almost inaudible, but it was there. I spun around, shining the flashlight in every direction, but I was alone. I backed away slowly, my heart racing, and rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. The unease had grown into full-blown fear. I called my parents, but their phones went straight to voicemail. Desperate, I called my friend Emily, who lived a few streets away. She answered on the second ring. "Emily, I think someone's outside my house. I don't know what to do," I said, my voice shaking. "Calm down, I'm coming over," she replied. "Stay inside and don't open the door for anyone." I felt a bit of relief knowing she was on her way. I locked all the doors and windows and sat on the couch, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. The minutes felt like hours, and every sound made me jump. Finally, I heard a knock at the door. I rushed to open it, expecting to see Emily, but instead, it was Mr. Hargrove. His expression was blank and his eyes were wide. "Is everything all right?" he asked in a monotone voice. I took a step back, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. "I'm fine, Mr. Hargrove. Just waiting for a friend." He took a step closer, and I could see something in his hand, a long, rusty crowbar. My blood ran cold. "I saw someone in your backyard," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Thought I should check it out." Just then, Emily pulled into the driveway, her headlights illuminating the porch. Mr. Hargrove looked at her, then back at me, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his house. disappearing into the shadows. Emily ran up to the door, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay? What was he doing here?" I explained everything, and we decided to call the police. When they arrived, Mr. Hargrove's house was dark and silent. They knocked on his door, but there was no answer. They searched the property and found nothing suspicious, but they promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood. After the police left, Emily stayed with me until my parents came home. I never told them the full story, not wanting to worry them. But from that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Mr. Hargrove moved away a few months later, and the neighborhood returned to its usual quiet. But every time I was alone at home, I would catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see his silhouette in the shadows, watching and waiting. It was a bleak, rainy evening when I found myself alone at home. My parents had gone on a weekend getaway, leaving me to look after the house. At 17, I was used to being by myself, but this time, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The storm outside was relentless, with rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. I decided to spend the evening watching movies, hoping to distract myself from the unsettling atmosphere. I settled on a horror film, thinking it would be a fun way to match the mood of the night. Halfway through the movie, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I cursed under my breath and fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to navigate. The house was eerily silent, except for the sound of rain hammering on the roof. I found some candles and lit them, casting flickering shadows across the walls. As I returned to the living room, I noticed something odd. The back door, which I was sure I had locked, was slightly ajar. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached it, the floorboards creaking under my feet. I closed and locked the door, my mind racing with thoughts of intruders. I tried to calm myself, reasoning that maybe I had forgotten to lock it properly. I decided to check the rest of the house, just to be sure. As I moved through the rooms, my anxiety grew. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling of being watched was growing stronger. In the hallway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were muddy footprints leading from the back door, up the stairs, and into my room. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the prints, each one distinct and fresh. Someone had been inside while I was in the living room. I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly made my way upstairs, my hand trembling. The footprints led straight to my bedroom door, which was slightly open. I pushed it open with the tip of the knife and peered inside, my flashlight beam sweeping the room. Empty. But then I heard it. A faint rustling coming from the closet. My pulse quickened as I approached, each step feeling like an eternity. I reached for the closet door, my hand shaking uncontrollably, and yanked it open. Inside, there was nothing but clothes and boxes. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe the storm and the horror movie had gotten to me. I decided to lock the bedroom door and try to get some sleep, hoping the power would come back soon. As I lay in bed, the rain continued to pound against the windows, the thunder now distant but still rumbling. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. Just as I was drifting off, I heard a whisper. "Are you alone?" My eyes snapped open and I bolted upright. The voice had come from right next to me. I turned on my flashlight and scanned the room, but there was no one there. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind in the dark. I lay back down, clutching the knife under the covers. Minutes felt like hours as I lay there, straining to hear any sound. And then I felt it, a cold, clammy hand on my ankle. I screamed and kicked, scrambling out of bed. The flashlight fell to the floor, casting erratic beams of light around the room. I saw a figure crawling out from under the bed, its eyes glowing in the dim light. It was a man, his face twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes wide with madness. He lunged at me and I swung the knife wildly, slashing at the air. I connected with something, and he let out a guttural scream, recoiling. I seized the moment and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I raced down the stairs and out into the storm, not stopping until I reached a neighbor's house. I pounded on the door, sobbing and shouting for help. They let me in, their faces filled with concern and confusion. We called the police and they arrived within minutes. The officer searched my house thoroughly but found no sign of the intruder. The only evidence was the muddy footprints and a few drops of blood in my bedroom. They assured me they would patrol the area and advised me to stay with my neighbors for the night. I never found out who the man was or how he had gotten into the house. The police never caught him, and the incident remained an unsolved mystery. I moved out as soon as I could, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of cold hands grabbing at me in the dark. Even now, years later, I can still hear that whisper in my nightmares. Are you alone?